Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the enveloping fragrance session. This is a Cliff Tea. It's the conclusion of our Cliff Tea extravaganza that started off with Rock Orchid. Last week was Flaming Deity, and we're wrapping it up with enveloping fragrance. So when we taste today, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I'm going to go backwards and talk about shop news in a minute. But when we taste today, let's think about what we've learned through the totality of these three sessions, because this has been a really good opportunity to ground yourself in the experience of Cliff Teas. And it's a range of them so that you get used to thinking about Cliff Tea a certain way, and you'll never be fooled by what anybody tells you a tea is. You'll know. All right, so what's happened this week at the shop? Lots of good things. First off, we got a sample or a box of samples, about 10 samples from one of our aggregators. They cleverly got it shipped out in a city that is open, and therefore that was able to leave because it didn't leave via Shanghai or any of the other cities which are experiencing difficulties. The second great piece of news. Last week I reported that 40 plus samples were trapped in a location. Well, they became untrapped. And on Friday, we received them. So we have 50 samples in shop. We've already gone through about 10. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, but this is a great piece of news that we can start on this process. We're talking to people in China regularly now and talking to them about sending or evaluating or providing more information, bunch of things that every night we're in communication with China. And that's part, by the way, of what differentiates us. There's lots of things which differentiate us from other tea purveyors. But one of the things which really differentiates us is out of 365 days of the year, we probably talk with China about 250 of those days, or 200 to 250. So quite frequently. And when we're talking to China, we're talking about understanding either terroir or climate, or understanding process, or explaining to us why things appear differently than we thought they should appear, or verifying what our thought processes are about the various teas. So that is what we've been spending a lot of time this week. We're very excited about what the future holds in terms of new teas. One of the things that we've already discovered from going through the samples, the 10 samples, is the following thing. And that is some regions of green tea, again, this year, for some reason, there is some difficulty in terms of it matching what we need, what you need, what everybody expects to be on the boards. Now, the other side of that is we've already found some green tea from some other regions that more than matches. So this isn't, so for those of you who have always been carefully husbanding how we're taking care of the green tea in here, I just want you to know we're on it, and we will be getting some wonderful new green teas. Next, in terms of website development, you do notice some changes to the website, further build outs of the website. You're going to see a few more of those, but we're hoping within the next 30 days or so to kind of come to a conclusion with that so that we can move forward with some other items. And we think that we're pretty close now. So that's what's going on the website front. I know that all of you do field trips. I love field trips. I always, since I've been a kid, have been excited. Oh, I get to go someplace new and I get to try something different. And so I'm a great believer in field trips. And I know all of you are as well. And as such, I want to report back about a field trip that's been reported by one of you. I'm not going to say who, and I'm not going to say the exact location of the field trip. However, it was to take a field trip to another tea shop. And this is always a great thing because then you come back and you bring the results and we can put it in our chart of results. And the results are almost always the same. Disappointment is actually one of the words that usually characterizes the results. And why would it be any different than that? In the sense of every tea purveyor, almost every tea purveyor, 99.9% of them start with the same thought. I love tea. I want to share my love of tea with everybody else. Now, there's nothing wrong with that thought. That's a great thought to have. The only issue is execution. Because in order to share a love of a product, any product, especially a handcrafted product, you need to understand the range of the product. That means you need to take time, you need to study, and you need to experiment, and you need to observe. All of those things. And if you're not doing that on a regular basis, it's really hard to keep up with products. So this particular field tripper went to a tea shop and tried out their Scarlet Road. They had it, and they said the following thing. The lead sentence is almost always the same from everybody. This doesn't measure up to what you have at Sophie's. Okay, I'm used to that. Then the second part was more revealing because they used quality arena. They used a description of taste and flavor. And remembering that all of us approach taste and flavor slightly differently, sometimes greatly differently. This was really interesting because it's one of the group who did this, and therefore they know what the standards are. And this is a Cliff tea. And it's particularly apropos that it's this week. So they led off the description with nice roast, but a hint of staleness. So when I hear the word stale, there's two things, and actually three things, which come to mind. And one of them is going to affect what we talk about today. Actually, they all affect what we're going to talk about today. So stale usually refers to improper storage. Okay, so what is proper storage of Cliff teas? Proper storage is cool. Let's define cool. Less than 70 degrees, preferably closer to 60 degrees. That's hard to live in if you're living in the same space as that tea, but as close to that range as you can maintain. So that's the first thing. What else is important in storage? Can you have lots of light shining on the tea? We got to see the tea every day. You know, some of us worship that tea every day, right? The answer is it's better if it's stored in the dark. That's better. Lastly, it's better if you purchased a lot that you segregate a daily use amount and then put the rest of the way in this nice, calm, cool, dark storage. And then you're set. Now, how long are you set for? Is this like a few days or a month. Oh no, you're set for at least 10 years. You can safely store Cliff teas at least 10 years. And if you're really adhering to these storage standards, this will age in a way. If the original Cliff tea was of good provenance, it will age and you can safely and in a good results way store it for up to 20 years. Now, if it's bad provenance Cliff tea, outside the mountain or an LCS creation, there's no guarantees how long that'll last. Probably won't last very long. And whatever you're trying to get to taste good isn't going to end up tasting good just because you store it for a long time. So that's the first thought that came in when I heard the word stale. The second thought was maybe a processing mistake, because Cliff teas are extraordinarily difficult to process. You've heard me, 20 to 30 steps when you're doing it by hand, fewer steps when you're doing it by machine, but a lot of steps, a lot of care, and a lot of time. No matter what, if you have the experience of processing a Cliff tea, it is going to take usually 3 months, 3 to 4 months, and you got to pay attention to each step. So the last thought when you hear the word stale related to a Cliff tea is it's not really a Cliff tea. It's an LCS creation. So those are the three thoughts. And in this particular commentator's description to me, it's my belief that this is simply a storage problem, although I cannot rule out that it isn't a processing problem as well. So let's talk a minute before we actually dive right into enveloping fragrance. One more small digression. Where does the word stale / rancid ever come into a description of a Wulong tea? Should you ever see that in a description of a Wulong tea? Now, as it turns out, in China, you will see that description. And part of the reason you'll see it is season of pick and processing. So if it's a summer pick and process, there tends to be some aroma almost of a little bit of stale. It's not quite right. Sometimes the autumn teas also have this. So be aware that at least in China, they do use this description occasionally. Yes?
When you said 3 to 6 months to process Cliff teas, is that from picking to packing?
Yes. So the question is 3 to 4 months to process the tea includes from the pick all the way up to the finished packing. However, most of the time, except here at Sophie's, most of the time, that tea is not available for about 6 months after the final roast. The reason being that sometimes that roast is so aggressive that it covers up everything and it just needs some time to, in quotes, cool down and let the other flavors come to the fore. So traditionally, when it's finished in August or September, farmer usually puts it away and then releases it at the end of the year for sale at the following Chinese New Year's. So that's usually about a 5 or 6 month lag. Although here we get it right away. Well, right away being a relative term, of course, right? We get it after we order it, and usually that order comes in at the end of September, or early October. But Shelby and I have lots of experience tasting samples. We've spent so much time at the Wulong Mountains that we know ahead of time with almost 100% certainty when something is roasted correctly, but that roast is still aggressive, we can taste down into that tea. And so we purchase sometimes teas that we can do anything we want, but teas that we won't direct you to until that roast is cooled down. So this is another use of the word stale and what it usually refers to when Chinese are talking about, Chinese in the tea industry. All right, last point, and then we'll really start enveloping fragrance. So enveloping fragrance is a cliff tea. Let's think about oolong tea. Is oolong synonymous with cliff? Well, let's be careful. Every cliff tea, that description, yan cha, always refers to a Wulong tea made in the Wulong Mountain style. Actually, it's more specific than that, made in the Wulong Mountains. Then you have other Wulongs. You have 3 other categories of Wulongs. You actually have 4 other categories. So let's talk about the 3 main ones. You have Taiwan Wulongs. What is the characteristic of those? In general, those are thought of as very fresh. That's the overweening characteristic of those. Then you have Southern Fujian Wulongs. And we have those here. You know, White Orchid, Iron Goddess Light. And those are usually more floral. And they're roasted lightly, but they're oxidized a little bit more, not a little bit more, significantly more than the Taiwan Wulongs. The Taiwan Wulongs are truly very light oxidation and very light roast. On Fujian, Southern Fujian, it is light roast and light to medium oxidation, occasionally a little fully in the medium realm. Then you have the category of the Canton Wulongs. So that would be the rising phoenixes, the transcendent rebirths, and those are Wulongs in the Wui style, but the varietals are different, and they're almost always all medium, light and medium roasted. The medium tends to be the way that they are roasted. And many of them have floral and hints of fruit. And they're not generally as complex as the Wui Wulongs. Now, I said that there is a 4th category. And ordinarily, I don't talk about this category because what is a Nepalese Wulong? What is an Indian Wulong? Well, it's not a Wulong that normally you're gonna drink. Is it okay? It's okay. But does it rise to the level of the best of the Chinese Wulongs? Never. The best of those Wulongs, and I've had a chance to have several of what's in quotes called the best, they're okay. They don't rank. And I can't have them on this board because they just don't meet the standard. All right, so let's now really dive deep into enveloping fragrance. Enveloping fragrance comes from in the mountain. It's at the edge of in the mountain, and ours is at the edge of in the mountain, but it's definitely within the mountain. It goes through all the normal processing that we've talked about over the last couple weeks. And it's the normal pick time. So the normal pick time being mid-April all the way up through about May 1st, first week of May. It is a slower growing varietal. So that means that there's less produced. So I think what I'm going to do, because there's a lot I want to cover today still about the cliff teas in general, I think I better get us started on this, because if I take one more digression, the tea master will come over here and take this clay pot and start brewing while I'm in a digression. We don't want that. So without further ado, let me bring in the tea master. The thirsty.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Xiao Wei. We do Wulong today. It's called Yan Cha. Yeah, Chinese called Yan Cha, but in the translated called rarity, cliff tea. Huh? So we do, huh? So this is my space. I think most people come here, they watch me, huh? They sing, huh? If you like, you can sing, huh? But you know, you have a lot of choice. So we do. Oolong. This is my space. I take moments. So this is the this is the for me, not for outside, huh? This is the I learned tea ceremony too in China. Yeah. So everybody sing me, huh? So it's okay. John, come here.
So you see, the tea master sets up her tableau as she does every week. And she's going to brew in the 16-ounce clay teapot. This is an Yixing pot. All these pots here are Yixing pots. And the routine will be as you've gotten used to. You're going to heat the pot. And remember last week, we talked a lot about heating the whole pot, not just the inside of the pot, but also the outside of the pot. Wulong teas love heat, and that's because of how they're processed. So making sure that the pot is as hot as possible within the realm of the temperature you're supposed to use, which is 200 degrees, is the correct thing to do. And again, the difference in the brand new pots that some of you purchased last week is that those retain heat better. And when you handle those pots, you have to be careful because they are so much hotter than these pots. And that has to do with where the clay comes from in the vein. All right, so she puts hot water, and she's using 200-degree water on both the inside and the outside of the pot. Puts it in the cup because we want to make sure that the receptacle cup is absolutely spotless and has no residue of anything which would leave an aroma or a flavor.
What is the pick again?
What is the what again? Oh, the pick. It's a spring pick. This is a spring pick, and this pick was done around April 22nd or April 23rd. By the way, for us, we don't get any summer or autumn or winter cliff teas. And in fact, in general, when you're getting teas from the farms that we're getting, they don't do any of those picks. They only pick once, and the price for these is so much that the farmers, they only need that one pick. Now, of course, they've got to take care of their fields in the off season, but that's different than actually picking a second or a third pick. They don't do that. And part of it also has to do with the farmers got together with government encouragement, especially in these premium areas, and said, we're not going to do that because we want to protect the plants. We want to protect the reputation of what we're doing.
Is it a bud, one bud and 2 or 3 leaves?
It's 1 bud and 3 leaves. So, so she puts the bag in there. She doesn't put the bag in there. She puts some leaves from the bag in there. And that was 6 grams. And this is going to be a 2-minute and 20-second steep. At 200 degrees. Again, you notice she's heating the whole pot. And when you pour it in, if you can avoid pouring directly on the leaves, that's a good thing. But, you know, we're human. And if we miss and we pour on the leaves, it's not the end of the world. All right. So now I'm going to give you some more information on this area. And what area am I talking about? I'm talking about the 70 square kilometer area that is the Brewing National Heritage Site. And so within the mountain is about a 7 square kilometer area. And wow, let me get some water. Goodness. I have I obviously haven't had enough tea yet this morning to get the system cooled down. All right, so I'm talking about this 7 square kilometer area within that 70 square kilometer area. That's within the mountain. So within the 70 square kilometer area, in 2007, they checked a survey and there were 305 families farming within that area, farming tea, I should say, within that area. And there were 769 processing places that were handling this tea. Does every farmer have their own processing facility? The answer is no. Some grow and sell direct to a processing facility, hence why you have so many processing facilities. Some rent to other farmers who then grow and process at their own facility or else sell to another facility. So you have lots of permutations. The key thing to understand is between 1978 and 2007, the amount of tea under cultivation increased 5 times. So the timer has gone off. Tea master deliberately pouring the tea liquor in the glass. Okay, so let's take a look at this color. That's the first thing that's of interest. When you do yours, it should be this color. And to me, this is a medium amber. I always like to check the leaves because this is a 200-degree brew. And thinking about how to appreciate cliff teas, can you just sit and gulp it down? The answer is no, it's 200 degrees. So how do you get the most value out of this? You get it by carefully smelling the leaves. Remember, this is very hot, so you don't want to stick your nose in it all the way, but you do want to get a sense. So you're trying to get a sense of several things here. This will always give you some first hints about the possibility of what's in here. It will also tell you a little something about the roast. We've already looked at the color. And now I'm going to take a 200-degree inhalation. So let's talk about this inhalation. When I inhale the tea, and I'm going to inhale this water so you can get the full sense of this, because when you inhale the tea, you have to be really, really careful that you don't inhale too much. But what I'm trying to get you focused on is an aspiration. And Americans, we're really polite. We don't slurp our soup. You know, when we drink things quietly. And that's civilized, right? American civilized. But when you're drinking tea, we dispense with that when we're inhaling. So you're really aspirating it. But not that much. You got to aspirate this and only aspirate a little bit into your mouth, because if you aspirate too much, your tongue will not forgive you for about 60 days. And you roll it around in your mouth, because as soon as you start this process, you're entering the quality arena. You got to make some judgments about this. And this is how you start to rank the tea. Now, this is the third consecutive week with a Cliff Tea. So step one of this really is to start to think about the mouthfeel. And you can inhale a couple times. You then think about, okay, where is it astringent? You think about aftertaste. And actually, let's talk about this a minute, because there's a key element about Cliff Teas which I just don't think I've emphasized enough. In China, they talk about it being slippery on the tongue. That's a quality that they're looking for. Well, wait a minute, this is a liquid. All liquids are slippery on the tongue. That's not what they really mean when they use that term. It's almost like you get it on the front part of your tongue, and while you're trying to understand it, it itself glides down your throat. That's the slipperiness that we're talking about. In other words, you don't find yourself swallowing, it just finds the route. Yes.
Can we do the aspiration on a side profile view so we can actually see what your lips are doing?
Oh, yes. Oh, you mean with the tea? Yes, that's fine.
Sure.
Okay.
Either.
And if I were doing it with water, if you were going to practice, it would look like this. Okay. So the question, as we're thinking about Cliff Teas and the quality arena, is, does this slip down your throat? Do you have to swallow? If you have to swallow, this is not good tea. Not good tea at all. The second thing you're thinking about is energetics. And over the weeks, all of you have provided many different types of energetics descriptions. Love the descriptions, because again, we're individually programmed, which means that our responses to things, our language around things is going to contain differences. And that's okay. They should contain differences. But you should think about the overall concept of, how do I feel? It's as simple as that. How do I feel after drinking this? And speed with which we appreciate things also differs from individual to individual. So some individuals, they do the first inhalation, oh, I'm feeling this way, or I'm feeling that way. Oh, you know, I've got this sensation or that sensation. Some of you take time. In other words, you'll do the inhalation and, well, I'm not feeling anything yet. That's fine also, because by the time you are a quarter through the cup, you will definitely be feeling something. And what that something is, that's you to tell me. That's not me to tell you, because there isn't a rule about that. And if anybody tells you that there's a rule, and so you have some things sometimes on the internet, and of course, you know, I apologize because we know that the internet is 99% correct. But that 1%, sometimes you have people who tell you you should feel a certain way. And the answer is no, you should not feel a certain way. You should be aware of how you feel, but there isn't a prescription. You got to feel this way or that way. All right. So I've gotten a sensation of what this tea is like to me. Tea Master is ready, more than ready, to do the brew with you. So go ahead. So she's making sure that the clay pot is properly emptied of the previous brew, the leaves from the previous brew. And so why do we use a clay pot? Is it just because it's pretty to have an unglazed pot? Is this an aesthetic thing? And the answer is no. When you have cliff teas, you're trying to get the best possible flavor. Well, what do you have to have? What's the outset of what the least common denominator? What do you have to have to get the best flavor? Well, you have to have the best equipment, you have to have the best water, and you have to have the best tea leaves. It's real simple. Certainly simple to say. Hard to achieve, because it turns out there's gradations in Yixing pots. Who knew? Turns out that there's different types of water which are described as really good water. Generally speaking, when the Chinese describe really good water, they're talking about spring water. Secondly, they're talking about clean river water. Thirdly, they're talking about well water. They're almost never talking about tap water, because tap water usually doesn't come up to the standard. When they talk about brewing container, they're usually talking about an Yixing pot. So let's eliminate some confusion before somebody asks me this question. Somebody's going to ask me, well, I've seen that Sichuan makes, you know, a certain type of pot. I've seen down in Chaozhou that they make, you know, the Chaozhou red clay pots. Does it matter where a pot comes from? And the answer is, it matters only insofar as what your flavor preference is. Each of the pots is going to give you a different in flavor. The Yixing pots have traditionally been used for these cliff teas. All right, so you put the tea leaves in, you set the timer for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Make sure that the cup is heated up. Okay, so what I am referring to, what I'm trying to do is give you a picture of the Wulong Mountains and to give you a picture of how processing is done and where it's occurring. So today, I don't know what the number of processing plants is. It's more than it used to be, but it's still a small number. So really what I'm trying to convey to you is that there just isn't that much done in the Wulong Mountains. And that 70 square kilometer includes half of the mountain. It's both fully in the mountain as well as half of the mountain. What it doesn't include, of course, is outside of the mountain. and it doesn't include LCS creations. That's not included. But when you're talking that 70 square kilometer, that's it. And so that's why this stuff is so rare. And that's why it's so pricey. Are there any other really important things you should know about these farmers? And the answer is yes. Some farmers have been farming for generations. So there's a very famous farmer who claims that they've been doing this since the beginning. So that would be around the end of the Ming Dynasty that their family has passed down the baton. And they're doing it fully handcrafted. Now, as it turns out, that's a misnomer. They're doing about 40% of their tea fully handcrafted. The other 60% they're using machines for part of it. Never a machine for picking. You can't mechanize the picking of this tea, but you can mechanize the shaking process. You can mechanize the rolling process. Will the results be the same? No. The handcrafted, definitely you can tell when you taste it. All right, your timers are up. And you're slowly dispensing the tea liquor into the glass.
Helpful information from a participant. 70 square kilometers is about 1/3 the size of the city of Oakland, which is about 202 square kilometers. So that's 1/3 the size of Oakland would be a pretty small space.
That is great. Thank you for that commentary. 1/3 the size of Oakland is a small space. And again, that shows you just how rare this is, because it's been being produced. The area has been gradually enlarged over time. And by over time, I mean since the Tang Dynasty. So in the Tang Dynasty, they were clearly already doing tea in these mountains. And, you know, part and parcel of how they got to this process was really driven by the fact that you had Taoists and Buddhists and Confucianists all living in peace in these mountains. And the Taoists and the Buddhists started to move away from focus on all the mythological and spiritual elements of their early beliefs, and started from the Tang Dynasty forward to develop ways to understand this tea, to grow the tea, to experiment with the tea. And remember, they, in conjunction with some of the best farmers, are the reason that this whole cliff tea process exists. It really comes from the happy marriage of philosophy / religion / farming. Yes.
The warm leaves have a medium roast, hint of chocolate scent.
Warm leaves have a medium roast, hint of chocolate scent. Yes.
Somebody else also gets some sweetness of fruit to the warm leaves.
So this is important. A sweetness or fruit to the warm leaves. And the reason this is important is cliff teas in general, unless there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, there is some sweetness when it's a really good cliff tea. Yes.
Both the dry and wet leaves for another participant have a definite roast to their aroma.
Dry and wet leaves have a definite roast to the aroma. Is the comment. And there's no question that this one though it is a medium to higher roast, that roast still has hung around. That is an element in this that you have to account for.
It seems thick and I get minerals on my tongue.
Good. Thick and minerals on the tongue. So there's a couple things that are really interesting about this, because some of the cliff teas, you have great variability between density or thickness on the tongue. And that's really important to take note of, because that's where you can find some major differences in these cliff teas. And as you're thinking about this, also think about some of the differences between this and rock orchid, this and flaming deity, and why do you appreciate one in a certain way versus one in another way.
Slippery liquor, it's kind of hard to catch the mineral and the roast. I'm still trying to capture the rest of it. That's one commentator's experience. Another says delicate but persistent viscosity.
So two great comments. Slippery roast, or
Kind
slippery,
of I think a slippery liquor.
A slippery
I'm
liquor.
thinking in
Okay.
terms of trying to capture what else there is beyond the mineral and the roast.
Okay, so great comment. Slippery liquor, and what the commentator really means is that there's stuff going on within the liquor. Yes, there's minerality. Yes, there's roast, but what else is going on is what this commentator is trying to evaluate. And that second comment?
Delicate,
Delicate.
but delicate but persistent viscosity.
So I like this one also. Persistent viscosity is the element that I'm going to really focus on here, because you do feel that even after it's gone down, oh, there's a leftover on my tongue. And the delicate, I really believe, refers to the leftover portion, because it isn't unpleasant. In fact, it is subtle, but it is there. And so that's why I like this comment, because you captured those things.
The infused leaves, pardon. Here we go. The infused leaves got darker like a moss and then rolled just slightly. The aroma is clean, sweet, gives off out a strong whiff of roastiness.
Aroma is clean and sweet with a whiff of roastiness. There is some initial taste of moss, and
well, there's a look of moss.
Look of moss.
Darkness to the leaves. Just an observation about how the leaves, the infused leaves, look.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned this, because the commentator, it's not a taste of roast, but a look of moss on the leaves. And it really is important to look at these leaves, because you'll see gradations in colors by varietal and by farmer. And this is how you start to segregate one farmer from another, because they're all using the same set of general standards. So there's about 8 things that you do to a tea leaf, but you do it in different, sometimes even order, but in different intensity by farmer. And this is what creates all these enormous differences by farms that are side by side. And you would think, well, gosh, one's skilled and one is unskilled. Not here. In the Wui Mountains, unless they've rented to farm, they are all skilled. if they have not rented and they have been steadily farming, they're all skilled. Because you don't survive in this environment. Because every year, every village in the Wulong Mountains has a competition, and then there's a mountain-wide competition. So this is a phase thing. When you're in this area, everybody says, oh, let's see yours, here's mine, that type of thing. Yes.
Someone else also agrees the flavor is hard to nail down. She's getting some sweetness and other flavors that are hard to identify, but it's pleasant.
Sweetness and other flavors that are hard to identify, but the overall feeling is one of pleasantness. And I like this comment a lot because this is an extremely pleasant tea. There is nothing in enveloping fragrance which makes you want to put it down and walk away. It's not that type of tea. And yet it's clearly different from both Flaming Deity and Rock Orchid in ways that, as you're thinking about them, may be identifiable to you.
There's a character to the scent of the steeped leaves that's not roast. It's subtle. It's almost like a very light malt or a floral scent, hard to fully define.
There's a character to the scent which is almost like malt, still hard to really define. And I like the use of the term malt. I like the use of the term hints of sweetness. I like the roast. I like all these terms, chocolate. I like all these terms that you're using, and you're getting around. You're beginning to get your arms around this, and it's great.
Another comments on the lovely amber color, and also this sort of a rainbow aroma, like sweetness or fruit or grass and some vegetal notes.
A rainbow of aroma. I love this term. I'm going to plagiarize this term. Sweet, hint of grass, hint of fruit. There is a gentle, I'm going to stick with the rainbow because rainbows are always well integrated. And that's what's beautiful about your comment, because this suggests integration of all these flavors, which, by the way, continue to change as you go down the cup. All right, any thoughts about this relative to either energetics or comparing to Flaming Deity and or Rock Orchid? And by the way, nothing you say here can be wrong. So some of you may approach from one angle and some of you may approach from another angle. That's the beautiful thing about these teas, because they invite commentary, they invite evaluation, and nonetheless, they remain mysterious because of their changeability throughout the cup.
As I'm getting into the tea liquor, it doesn't have any sharp edges.
No sharp edges as this commentator gets into the tea liquor. And that's a beautiful thing about this tea. That actually, for me, is kind of a leading comment. And I'll tell you why, because that almost fits squarely in the quality arena. You could say that starting off, and right away, anybody who hasn't had it yet, okay, I know what to expect. There's going to be balance, there's going to be hard to define, and yet it's going to be easy.
For me, complex, like 70+% dark chocolate, with just enough fruit and sweetness to allow access and slightly tang.
Like this a lot. So this commentator compares it to a 70% dark chocolate. And the comparison that's really being made here is not a chocolate taste, but the complexity of the underlying notes. When you have a bar of chocolate, dark chocolate, yes, there sometimes can be a primary note, but most of the great chocolates have a lot of notes in them. And this is no exception. Enveloping fragrance has, that's just it. Enveloping fragrance is enveloping lots of fragrances, lots of flavors, a really full rainbow.
I feel my sense of touch, such as that sense of viscosity is overriding my sense of taste. The energetics are really a curiosity.
So the sense of touch, did you say touch?
Yeah.
Is
but-
overriding the sense of taste. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. And okay, so let's back
So-
up. What's the mystery?
The mystery, two mysteries. Well, one is really sort of maybe the energetics, the
Okay,
experiential
the
part of,
energetics. Okay.
wow, this is in my mouth. I sense the viscosity, but I more, almost even more than I'm getting flavor. My brain is going to, this commentator's brain is going to viscosity. And then the other energetics are just uncertain.
So I love this comment. Took me a bit to capture it, but I love it because there is not a clear demarcation line. The tea goes down in a slippery manner, but it's really hard to define fully the energetics. The energetics are a mystery in this tea to this commentator, but the experience in the mouth is not, and the viscosity is not. These things are not mysteries, but what the underlying energetics is a mystery.
Another says the smell and taste are more subtle than the previous teas we've tried.
The smell and taste are more subtle than Flaming Deity and Rock Orchid. I love this comment. I was waiting for this comment because this one just is so much harder. It doesn't have that clarion note. You look at Rock Orchid, you remember right away, clarion note. Oh, there's some caramel in there. There's a little chocolate going in there. There's some fruit going on in there. A little lychee maybe going on there. Flaming Deity, again, you got balance going on in there. You have things that right away, it's like the trumpeter gets up and it's their turn to do a solo. And you catch those solos early. Here, the whole darn orchestra is playing and nobody's getting a chance to do a solo, is the sense that you're conveying. And I love that sense because there's nothing wrong with solos. And we like solos, right? But there's also nothing wrong with a beautiful orchestral movement. And this is what this tea is. It's a beautiful orchestral movement at a lower pitch. So let's think about that a minute. With Rock Orchid and Flaming Deity, in China, they would talk about that as, in quotes, high notes, high pitched. And what they mean by that is that it's more distinctive. Here, we're talking about confusion of energetics. We're talking about deep balance. We're talking about heaviness, a heaviness without an oppressiveness. It's a balance. And there's a real difference because it's not heavy. I don't want to drink this. It's heavy. It leaves a delicate viscosity on my on my tongue.
Getting a sense of about 40% into the cup of warmth in my chest and a feeling that I can defeat the enemy simply by looking at them across the battlefield.
Hey, I love this one. All of you have woken up some morning thinking, what tea am I going to have this morning that I'm going to be able to crush problems or opponents with just one look? This tea. This is what this commentator talks about. And again, this, in all seriousness, this comment really relates to the fact that there is that power in this tea, that viscousness, the power of balance, the power of the whole orchestra playing together.
One commentator finds that this tea has the most depth of flavor as compared to the prior to the rock orchid and flaming tea.
So depth of flavor. And again, I go back to that orchestra. You get the depth of flavor because everything, as you get into the cup, seems to fire at once. You still have minerality as you go down the cup. The roast has not left. And yet other flavors kind of flow up together.
Of the 3 cliff teas in this session, my favorite is Flaming Deity. I found it smoother on the tongue, juicier, with a delightful balance between the roast and the minerality, while enveloping fragrance is very pleasant. Its flavor takes longer to reveal itself to me.
So this commentator compares Flaming Deity to enveloping fragrance. Enveloping fragrance is not, let's see, both teas are great. I think that this commentator is saying, but the commentator prefers the Flaming Deity and the sense of comfort that that gives you right away and the identification of flavors right away. This one is a heavier and not as easy and takes longer to reveal itself.
What is the percentage of oxidation or the range for this tea?
So the range of oxidation for this tea, this is oxidized anywhere from 60 to 70%. So this is on the heavier end of oxidation.
Are you able to tell us a follow-up to that, to tell us the differences in the amount of oxidation of the 3 teas?
No. So the question is, can I tell you in a Western manner the percentages of oxidation of the 3 teas? And the reason I can't do that is because we didn't actually go in and measure ourselves. I don't trust, when you ask it that way, I know that it's more of a scientific approach, and that's okay. That's not a problem. But then I need to give you a scientific answer. If I were going to instead give you a general answer, I would answer the following way. I would say that rock orchid is the least oxidized of these 3, and that Flaming Deity falls at the higher end, probably 50 to 60, and this is about a 60. So and by the way, rock orchid, so let's get real clear. Rock orchid is not a lightly oxidized tea. It still belongs to the medium to heavy oxidized. So we're not going from light to heavy. That's not what's happening here. But you are identifying some differences, and there are clear differences in amount. And one of the things I realized I forgot to say in the previous commentator's comment was they preferred the Flaming Deity because of the juiciness. And that's really important because there's slippery, right? We talked about slippery and we have a clear definition today. And then there's juicy. And that's 2 real different concepts. And you can have slippery and juicy at the same time. And instead, today we're talking about slippery and dense, slippery and viscous, leaving a delicate patina on your tongue of that viscousness.
Someone else says her focus seems clearer as she's finishing her mug, and another couple folks second that. The tea seems to help lift the fog of the morning.
So 2 or 3 comments about lifting the fog of the morning, being more focused, and absolutely, that's an energetic. And I will tell you that I saw a label in China that this comment makes me think of this label that I saw. And the label on the tea, and it wasn't this tea, it was another Cliff tea, said that there are 10 health benefits. And benefit number 2 was more focused and better thinking. That was benefit number 2. And I laughed at the time about it. But now as we're talking about this, I really do like the energetic here of focused. More focused implies, of course, that you're going to do better thinking. But better thinking by itself is what made me laugh when I originally saw the label, because I didn't link them properly together. But when you link them properly together, that works.
Suggested food pairing. I asked this tea seems to whet my appetite.
Okay, so a suggested food pairing is what's asked in this one. And you know, usually what I would like with something like this would be something like a croissant. A croissant would be perfect with this. And I'll tell you what, croissant is light but buttery, and this has a heaviness to it, or a density. I don't like the word heaviness here. Density to it, and leaves again that delicateness in your mouth. And I think the two would probably end up complementing each other. All right. Oh my goodness, as usual, guilty as charged, what we're talking. However, I really wanted to get to a few of these things because this is, like I said, of these 3, or this set of 3 Cliff Teas, it gave you a range. And we're focusing more this year on trying to give ranges. Because again, we always say you get an experiential PhD. Well, the reason you get an experiential PhD is because we have this range that you can try. You can almost side by side, or certainly week by week, take good notes, compare your notes, and have a feel for these teas. And also it should leave in your mind that why is it important, again, to use good tools and to have good water and good tea leaves? Because you can't get this to this level unless you have all of those elements. And it's really, really important not to be sloppy, especially with Cliff Teas, because, you know, once you understand the Cliff Tea, then you can drink it in a social situation or a work situation, and it doesn't matter because you already know what the essence of it is. And every time you drink it, you feel that essence surging through you, even if it's subconscious. All right. As usual, you all are fantastic, and your commentary is very stimulating, and you covered all the bases. Really, really a great job. Next week, we start another series, and this series is a red tea series. So we'll have 3 different red teas, and it'll give you an opportunity to have red tea from 2 different areas. And that should be interesting in itself in terms of telling you a little bit about what a red tea from one area is versus another one, and then also start to help you identify, well, what area or what region of red tea do I like the most? So look forward to that. I think we start off with Splendor next week, and my message is the same as usual. Have a very safe week, and truly look forward to seeing everybody next week. Bye-bye now.